Ladies and gentlemen, following the service here, interment will take place at Hebron Memorial Park Cemetery. There is not going to be a formal procession to the cemetery. That's why we have the directions available to you by each of the register stands. The family is observing Shiva through this evening at the residence of Elaine and Dr. Barry Moss, 20232 Forest Wood in Southfield. But the families requested their privacy between 4 p.m. and 6:30. Religious services will be conducted at 7 p.m. tonight. And for those of you that wish to further honor Ann's memory, you may do so by making a contribution to Art Road. This information is also available to you by the register stands. At this time, we ask everyone to please just take a moment and silence your cell phones.
Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai Roi Lo Echsar, Binotesha Yarbitzeni, Al Mei Menuchot Shenaleini, Nafshi Yeshovev, Yancheni V'Magle Tzedek, Leman Shemo, Gam Ki Elech, Begetz Al Mavet, Lo Irara, Ki Ata Imadi, Shivtecha Umishantecha, Hema Yenachamuni, Ta'aroch Lefanai Shulchan, Neged Sorarai, Dishanta Vashem En Roshi, Kosi Revaya, Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni, kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai liorech yamim. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The book of Ecclesiastes teaches us a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven. A time for planting and a time for reaping, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for embracing and a time for refraining, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for laughing and a time for weeping, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking, and a time for losing. This morning, we are coming together to pay honor to the life and memory of Ann Robinson. We are glad to have you here with us this morning to remember Ann, and we are fortunate that we're going to be hearing from three members of her family. We're going to talk about her life, the values in her life. First, we're going to call on her daughter-in-law, Erin, to share words with us.
Hello, everyone. Many words. Okay. I'm Erin Stillman, daughter-in-law of Ann Robinson. Her story begins as Ann Sharon Holton, born December 13 to Elmer and Madeline Holton. She was the eldest of three, having a sister, Beverly, and a brother, Robert. There are just a few stories I've heard about Ann when she was young. One of them was when she was 16, and her and her friends were on their way to Kensington in a convertible. She, being fearless and adventurous teenager that she was, sat on the upper edge of the back seat. I'm sure it was a joy ride up until the car flipped over on Ann's leg and she was pinned by it. She was in the hospital with a broken leg, suffered other complications, which forced her to stay in hospital longer than anticipated, and having to endure painful physical therapy. Ann attended Cass Technical High School and studied commercial art, as did I, and graduated in 1954. In her young adult years, Ann was sophisticated and beautiful, with long, straight blonde hair, green eyes, flawless ivory skin, a slender figure, wearing the fashion of the day. She always had good taste in clothing and bought only the best. In her later years, she loved to adorn herself with handmade jewelry consisting of beaded necklace strands, wearing as many as 13 rings at a time, and twice that many bangle bracelets. She and Elvin Stillman, her first husband, married 7/7/57. She was 22, he was 23. He was drafted into the Army, stationed in Nuremberg, Germany, and Anne accompanied him there, and they lived there for 2.5 years. She rode her bicycle everywhere, learned to speak German with the natives, made friends with other Army wives, all while I am sure she missed her family back home. While there, their first child, Jeffrey, was born, and when he was 6 months old, they returned to the U.S. And later, their second son, Stephen, was born. She was a stay-at-home mom when her sons were young, and it wasn't until her late 30s she began her college education. During that time is where my story with her begins. In 1973, Anne's son Jeff and I met while babysitting, and he was painting the basement floor of Anne's friend's home. Shortly after that, we began dating. I accompanied him to the reception of Stephen's bar mitzvah. And there I met Elvin and Anne, along with other members of his extended family. Soon after this event, Elvin and Anne split up, and I began to spend more and more time with Jeff at Anne's house. I remember being somewhat intimidated by her, as I was a shy, skinny, soft-spoken 16-year-old, and Anne was a loud, large, and anything but shy woman. At that time, she was a 38-year-old single woman tasked with raising her 2 sons, aged 15 and 13, that referred to her as Ma. She was a no-nonsense woman with a gruff exterior, but she had a warm and giving heart and was genuine, compassionate, and down-to-earth. Anne had just earned her Bachelor of Science degree in education, majoring in special ed from Wayne State University. 3 years later, in 1976, I was in attendance at her marriage to Phil Robinson in the home of her moms. In 1983, Anne earned her master's degree in reading from Wayne State University, and she chose to work for 35 years, retiring at age 73. Later, she was also quite proud when her own 2 sons both graduated from undergrad and law school, and planned for each of them a wonderful party. As anyone who visited Anne in her Detroit home knows, housekeeping was not her strong suit. But she was a great cook, and I enjoyed having many meals with her, Stephen, Jeff, and Phil in their home. Jeff's college pursuits took the 2 of us to California, where we lived with his dad, Elvin, in San Francisco. I know Anne was apprehensive about how I might keep Jeff from achieving his goals if I tagged along, but he and I wanted to be together. On the morning of our departure, she made Jeff's favorite breakfast, pancakes, but the sadness and nervousness to say goodbye made her so anxious, she burned his send-off meal. I remember seeing her cry for the first time, and as she said goodbye to him that day. Years later, when Jeff and I invited her over for a picnic to surprise her with our pregnancy news, the same thing happened in reverse when Jeff burned our barbecue chicken meal. Going out to eat was one of her favorite things to do. Her favorite restaurant was called Bart's in Ferndale. She became a regular customer there, and they even named a menu item after her, Anna Banana Pancakes. When we lived in California, she came to visit us and wrote often. When we came back, we both lived with her and Phil for a year. I am forever grateful that she opened her heart and home to us, asking for nothing in return. We enjoyed many meals she cooked together, listened to jazz, her favorite music, and enjoyed each other's company. Anne was always a giving person, never asking for anything in return. Whenever we needed to borrow money or help with our dog sitting, babysitting, anything, she was always there. And when we would thank her profusely, she would say, "That's what parents are for, to be taken advantage of." She was a great mom and mother-in-law, but she was beyond excited when she became grandmother to her first grandchild, our son Josh. To help ready the nursery, she designed and painted a mural of a nursery rhyme characters on the bedroom wall. It was truly a labor of love. Her husband, Phil, passed away when Josh was 5 months old, and I'd like to hope that her new role as grandma helped to ease some of that grief. Jeff started law school 2 years later, right before the birth of our second child, Leah. Anne volunteered to come over once a week and babysit both kids while I worked and he went to class. As grandparents today, I now realize how exhausting that must have been for her after working a full day herself. The example sent and showed by her showed me how good to be a good mother-in-law and grandmother. She seldom gave advice unless asked for it, didn't sweat the small stuff, complimented me often on my mothering skills, and gently comforted me when I needed a confidence boost. She was part of everything that made me shine as a mom by being there to help me whenever I needed her. I also wanted her to be there for everything involving us and our kids. When they were babies, she didn't use baby talk with them, sing songs, or do other interactive play, which was very different from what seemed very natural to me. As the kids matured, she was very in tune with their personalities and tailored her gift-giving to those traits. She made them an important part of her busy life. She was there for all their stage performances, including attending 3-hour dance recitals when my kids' dance only lasted 3 minutes, as well as attending outdoor sporting events in the rain and the snow. And I'll never forget when she came to one of Josh's basketball games, arriving late, as her usual habit. Jeff and I were on the other side of the gym at Hillel, and she saw us and started walking towards us. She made a beeline across the gym, oblivious to the fact that a game was in play, and nearly got run over by a player. Plays, choir concerts, graduations, band performances, and many more, you name it, she was there. At our daughter Leah's bat mitzvah 14 years ago, we all met Peter Benz. Ann and Peter began a 14-year companionship, although it might be even longer than that, going out at least once a week together, enjoying a trip to Hawaii, and accompanying one another to family gatherings. He was like a grandfather to my kids and sadly passed away earlier this year. Ann's greatest compassion was her art, which took on many forms. Her artistic aptitude was recognized in childhood, and we have her letters written by her grade school teachers attesting to her talent. Her love of creating art continued through her lifetime, her style changing to more abstract pieces in recent years. She also earned an income making lettering stencils for use in printing of bowling shirts. That the way it was done before computer graphics came into play. Besides painting, pastel, ceramics, lettering, sculpture, and quilting, she also painted rocks to look like buildings, thus creating a rock city, which she sold at art fairs. We saw her prize-winning works displayed in galleries. Art was such an influence, she even named her beloved cat Monet. I am so fortunate, along with others, to have her art proudly displayed in our home. She truly left us a gift that will last forever. Ann was employed by Detroit Public School System, her first job as an art teacher at the Detroit Day School for the Deaf. She then became a teacher consultant for special ed students, helping them with reading. This did not include teaching art, but she continued taking art classes for self-enrichment. About 10 years ago, Ann started to gradually exhibit signs of forgetfulness. The first time I remember it happening was when she was supposed to pick Jeff, myself, and the kids up from the airport. She was over 2 hours late because she forgot how to get there, and she had a look of panic in her eyes when she finally arrived. Before we knew that what she was really going through, we would lovingly joke about her forgetfulness, but it was truly out of her control. On some occasions, it brought comic relief, like the time Jeff, Stephen, and I went out to lunch with Ann. The waitress took her order first, which in itself was a tedious endeavor, then took orders from the rest of us. Then she said, "I'll be right back with your order," to which Ann quickly replied, "Wait, you didn't take my order yet." We chuckled because it was funny, but at the same time it was embarrassing to her and us. When we would call her on these things, she would indignantly reply, "Ask me if I care." Then always added, "Hey, I made that saying up." Of course, we'd laugh more because she didn't. Ann lived in a big house in Detroit for 44 years until she moved into an apartment in Walled Lake 6 years ago, and then moved into a senior living facility in Farmington Hills. She regularly participated in group activities that were offered, made friends with the residents, and fell in love with playing bingo. Jeff, Stephen, and I threw her an 80th birthday party 3 years ago. Prior to this, she had been hospitalized for days, and she knew this party in her honor was coming up. So she did everything she could to be released that day. It was attended by 45 people, family, and friends, and her cake was made to look like a bingo board, which she loved. We enjoyed 3 more birthday celebrations with her after that. In those 3 years, we were happy to have her in attendance at many other family gatherings, one of which was our daughter Leah's marriage to Chris in May, where Ann had a great time and even stood in place holding on to her walker and danced. Sadly, she was not well enough to be at our son's marriage to Jess 3 months later. Since September 18, after a fall at Brookside Senior Living, she was hospitalized, went into rehab, and then into assisted living. Living with dementia is truly living in the moment. because there is no recent past and is no planning for the future, only what is happening now and memories of long ago. Anne wouldn't remember details of our togetherness, but she remembered how we made her feel. Throughout her life, I rarely heard Anne complain about anything regarding her health. She also didn't do too much to maintain it either, meaning she loved her chocolate and sweets and would do anything she could to enjoy them, including hiding them from her kids who would try to take them away to maintain her sugar levels. She had many good friends and participated in social activities with them, including being part of a mahjong group, a quilting group, a stock club group, art classes, and regular lunches with a group of teachers that she worked with, just to name a few. She also was an avid reader and owned bookshelves full of books from ceiling to floor. She was a collector of many things as well, but frog art was her favorite. In her last days, she was in hospice, and although painful, I felt blessed that we had that time to reflect on what she meant to us and tell her how much she was loved. She passed away while a resident of the Farmington Hills Assisted Living Facility, a place filled with a community of workers that treated her with dignity and compassion. So we come to what one would think is the end of her story, but it's not. Her story will live on because her two sons, Jeff and Stephen, have inherited her genetic and personality traits, as did her grandchildren and great-granddaughter Cambria. I am not her biological child, but she made me feel like one and always told me that I was the best daughter-in-law she could have imagined. I know each of you have stories to tell about how she impacted your life. Today, I tried to tell you how she impacted mine. I'm so grateful for the 44 years I knew her in which she gave me guidance, made me laugh, treated me warmly, and showed her love and support. She was a pillar of strength that I relied on so many times, and she also raised a son who married me. And like the vows that he and I took 35 years ago to love and cherish in sickness and in health, he did the same with her. Thank you all for your support and your words and presence. I know Anne would want to thank you for your friendship and love as well. I have heard that when an artist dies, God lets them paint the sky with a beautiful sunset. Here's a wish that she rests in peace, and I look forward to seeing the art she'll create from heaven.
We're now going to invite Anne's granddaughter, Leah, to share words with us.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Leah Jansen, and I'm Jeff Stillman's daughter and therefore Anne Robinson's granddaughter. Today I want to share my love for my grandma by touching on 3 things that, in my opinion, made her her. Her intelligence, her love, and her sassy sense of humor. My grandma was so smart. As my mom said, it wasn't until her 30s that my grandma went to school to get her bachelor's degree. But she did it, and she followed it up with a master's degree. Not to mention, she was basically parenting alone at that point, and she was able to show her 2 young sons firsthand what determined women can accomplish. Her intelligence wasn't limited to the classroom, where she taught and communicated via sign language with children with special needs, but was also showcased on her drawing board. Her ability to look at something ordinary, find the beauty, uniqueness, and eccentricity in it, and recreate those qualities to allow others to also delight in them was extraordinary. Her imagination took the lead, and her intelligence and creative skill allowed those visions to come to life. I look at trees, staircases, and even colors differently because of her work. Even when she began to lose her memory, she used her smarts to keep it a secret. I remember visiting her in the hospital and asking her if she had eaten lunch that day, as she had recently developed a habit of not eating. She said she had, and I looked at the menu options and asked her what she ate. She looked back into my eyes and said, "A variety of things," followed by a sly smile, clearly impressed with her ability to fool me. My grandma loved widely and profoundly. She looked with a generous and kind heart on her children, grandchildren, great-grandchild, and all others in her family. She often told me what a wonderful mom I have and how appreciative she was that she had her in her life. She came to every event that I was in, dance recitals, plays, pom performances, you name it. If I was in it, she was there. She'd been getting less healthy over the last few years, and I told her repeatedly that she better be well enough to attend my wedding in May, and you bet she made sure she was. She applauded every effort that I put forth, even when it wasn't unique or extraordinary by any measure, because she was just glad that I was trying. She encouraged me in every endeavor, through education to traveling, and she thought that it was important that I write down my thoughts and feelings along the way. It wasn't just her family that she loved deeply. As a teacher myself, her love for her students resonates with me. A teacher spends 40 hours a week with her students, more than many parents get to claim with those same children. Out of her love for them and her work, she continued teaching into her 70s, which astounds me. When I come home at the end of 1 week, I'm completely beat, and I can't believe that she would continue to do this in Detroit for so much of her life. But her love for her students overpowered anything else. She also loved music and reading. I'm so happy she passed down her love of crime stories to my dad, who passed it on to me. She loved going to art shows and appreciating the creative work of others. She always wanted to buy new jewelry made by local artists. When I think of the things that come to my mind that my Grandma Ann loved, I realize they all revolve around communication and others. Her dedication to her family, her work with her students, her studies and interest in language, her love of art and music as methods of expressing oneself, all have to do with being in contact with and sharing oneself with others. My grandma may not have listened to advice on what to do or the arrival time for a family gathering, but she knew how to listen without judgment, and she'd follow that with love. I can't finish this part without noting the one thing that she especially loved more than anything else: chocolate. Another thing we have in common. And third, what I will remember so vividly about my Grandma Ann is her sassy sense of humor. When I was in middle school, my grandma started to notice that other people had personalized license plates, and she said she wanted to get one for herself. When I asked her what she wanted written on it, she said, "Whatever." And I asked her why she wanted that, and she said she just liked it. Many of you were at her 80th birthday that my parents and Stephen threw for her 3 years ago, but you may not remember what happened when she went to blow out her candles. She hung over her cake like this, in a hinged position, for what seemed like an eternity. And she was wearing a birthday cake that had candles on it, and she almost lit the candles on fire. And after a minute or two of sitting motionless, a few of us started to wonder if she had a heart attack. And she smiled and sat up and started cracking up because she thought it was the funniest joke she'd ever played. And then she had to clean up all the cake that had gotten on her blouse. And when she was asked what she wished for, she said, "I hope I can do this again next year." And even in her last days, she didn't lose her sense of humor. She'd been put in hospice and was laying in bed, fading in and out of consciousness, with little desire or ability to speak. And our rabbi, Rabbi Rubenstein, came to her facility. And when he arrived, he explained why he was there, and he asked if he could lead a few prayers for her. And she said yes. He explained, "I'm going to say a few prayers that are typically said for people who are gravely ill, because I understand that you are really quite sick." And my grandma opened her eyes wide and stared at him, and with precision and clarity said, "I am so not sick." A few days after that, I told her I loved her, and she responded, "Good," and smiled, followed by, "I love me too." Her final days were full of hugs and kisses for us and from us, telling us she loves us, and many, many eye rolls and side eyes for times when we didn't understand what she was trying to say. Her sass gave me many memories of laughing with her, and I'm happy that her confident spirit is part of me too. The best part about my grandma's sense of humor was that she was always willing to laugh at herself. Last week, it was an honor to attend a ceremony where my cousin Jeremy was sworn into the state senate. At this ceremony, Brenda Lawrence spoke about him and said it isn't a resume or a list of positions that create a legacy. It is the effect that you have on those you love and serve. Plain and simple, my Grandma Ann made me feel special. She taught me by example to be fierce, strong, confident, and creative. She will live on for me when I hear a jazz musician, see a colorful view, or a painting of nature. A chilled can of Fresca, frog memorabilia of any sort, the kind eyes of my dad, the sassy wit of my uncle, the needs of my students, and twinkling Christmas lights that are the dazzling green of her eyes. And of course, anything chocolate. I hope we all remember her in our own way when we encounter the things and the people that she loved. I love you so much, Grandma Ann, and she'll be alive in me forever.
And finally, we're going to invite Ann's grandson, Josh, to share some words with us.
I was too young to speak at my Grandpa Carl's funeral. But losing a grandparent the second time around is not any easier. I don't know which would be harder, losing a parent immediately or watching one slowly fade away. Both my mom and dad have now lost a parent, and I've seen it happen both ways. When I lose a parent, I can only hope to handle whatever the situation may be with as much strength, love, and dedication as my two great examples and my uncle have done before me. I love you all so much. Someone told me once that you only really get to see your parents act like kids when they're around their parents. Being a grown man with a family of my own has really proven this to me personally. Because although I have responsibilities at home and a life much of my own, whenever I return to my parents' house, the nostalgia of my childhood and their company makes me feel cozy and warm. It's a feeling that I may not admit often, but nevertheless one that I always long for. I got to see this same feeling written all over my parents' faces each time my grandma would show up at our house. Originally, it started as a feeling of relief when my grandma would come over and take my sister and I, who were younger at the time, out for a couple hours and get us out of my parents' hair for a while. God knows, with a kid of my own, I understand that relief now. But times changed, and my grandmother's role shifted from someone who would physically step in to help to that of someone who would carefully watch and offer advice from the sidelines. This didn't change the need that my parents had for her in their lives, to feel comforted just by having her around. And she was around, always. She was at every family function, every birthday party, every recital, every band concert, every graduation. My grandma was always there. And now I see that it wasn't only for my sister and I that she was there. She was there for my parents, too. She was there to offer them comfort in hard times. She was there to rejoice with them in good times. She was there to see them grow as proud parents. And she was there for them in much the same way that my parents are there now for my wife and I. As we grow old, we never fully turn into the future versions of ourselves we imagine in the mirror. While yes, it is true that our bodies grow and age as we go through life, our inner child remains the same. Our souls stay young. We never get to an age where we don't need our parents' advice. And we never get to an age where it doesn't hurt to lose them. But while this hurts for everyone right now, because we've lost my grandma, we have not lost the times that we shared in her company or the lessons she taught us, or the memories we have of her. We have an ever-present reminder of the legacy she left just by looking across the room at all the people here that she positively affected. I could reminisce over specific memories I have with my grandma, of her taking me to karate classes or out to breakfast at her favorite joints. I could talk about how I think she's a huge reason I'm fearlessly pursuing art as a career. I could tell you how I can still hear her voice call to me, "Joshua!" But I think I'll keep these memories sacred and secret. What my grandma would want me to tell you is to stay weird. Don't be afraid to do something different, to be different, to act different, to come in second place, to embarrass your family and friends in public, to have restaurant name menu items after you, to wear dangly earrings and bright colors. Don't worry if people call you crazy or tell you to fit inside a box. My grandma didn't listen to those people. She did things her own way. And I intend to live a life like her. I love you, Grandma.
Since I didn't really know Anne other than to meet her on a few occasions with the family, I'm going to leave what was said so beautifully by her family as is, other than to add one piece which was told to me by the family, which is related to the prayer I'm about to say. At a funeral we say the El Male Rachamim, the memorial prayer, which we'll say in just a moment here, and then at the cemetery as well. And one of the phrases talks about being tachat kanfei hashchina, being under the wings of the presence of God. We deliver Anne under those wings to be protected and cared for by God. The other time that we use that phrase in particular is when someone converts to become a Jew, chooses to become Jewish, that you come under the protection of God's presence also. And I'm told that Anne was very proud of having become part of the Jewish people. And from everything we've heard, she has been a credit to the Jewish people and to all that it means to be a mensch, to be a true person, in the way that she treated the people around her, the people closest to her, her students, and the world at large that she came into contact with. So I wanted to mention that at this time as I ask you to please stand for the recitation of the memorial prayer. El Male Rachamim Shochen Bamromim Hametzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina B'malot Kedoshim U'Torim Kezohar Harakia Mazirim Et Nishmat Ruth bat Avraham v'Sara she'alcha li'olama b'Gan Eden te'menuchata Ana bal rachamim hastireha b'seter knafecha li'olamim u'tzeror b'tzor hachayim et nishmata Adonai hu nachalata v'tanuach b'shalom amishkava v'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Anne Robinson, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And together we say Amen.